My name's Woody Zuill. I'm a software developer, and I've been writing software since 1982 or so, when I could first buy a personal computer. Before that, if you wanted to do computer software, you had to work someplace that had a computer, or you were a really early adopter. A couple of my brothers built a computer in the late 70s. It's like a table, that size of a table, like a regular table just covered with wires, and it actually worked really well. They had a teletype machine for both the input and output. It was pretty cool. Anyways, so just so you know, I've been around doing this for quite a while, and starting about 20 years ago almost, I started writing software for other people. Initially, I started writing software for myself. So everything I did was solo, and I wrote it for a business that I had, a couple businesses, where we needed software, and you couldn't buy high-quality software in those days for these kinds of computers. Mine was a CPM machine. But Apples and PCs or whatever they had back then, most of the software wasn't worth owning. You pay a few $100 for a piece of software and you start using it and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. I figured I could do just as poorly as that myself. So I actually asked my brother, I said, do you think I could learn to program? And he said, any idiot can learn to program. So he was implying, I think, more than just I would be able to learn. I want to start with this little saying from Peter Block. The value of another's experience is to give us hope, not to tell us how or whether to proceed. So I'm not here to tell you how to do something. I'm going to share with you how we did something. So that might be useful to you. It might not be useful to you, but I'm not here to... I would hope that you would go away from here not going, oh, Woody said this, so that's what we should do. But you would say, oh, here were some ideas I heard and I'd like to experiment with. I would love for that. But this is important to me because I've been to a lot of talks over the years where people told us basically how to do stuff, and later on you find out they've changed completely to something else, and they're just, they're maybe slightly too confident in the stuff they think works. So this worked for us in a specific setting, and people are using it all over the world now. We'll share a little bit about that in a moment. So here's the basic of what mob programming is. It's all the brilliant minds working on the same thing at the same time and in the same space. And that's basically what Agile Software Development gives us, or that's what Agile Software Development focused on. The idea, let's not separate people by time, which means a phased approach of doing our work. If we get rid of the time, let's get them all working and talking about the things we're all working on right now. So if we're close enough to each other where we can easily have those communications, that helps. Mob programming just takes pair programming a slight step further and says, let's just work at the same computer. We're going to take all these people and be at the same computer while we're working. So how can we make that happen, and how did it happen for us? That's what I'm going to share for you today. Oh, I should say, I really appreciate this conference. These folks here do a stellar job. I was here last year, and I'm really, really happy to be here this year. So no matter what, I want to make sure before I get too far into this and I forget, I'm very thankful for them for inviting me and having me come to NDC London. It is a great gathering of people. I love it. So when I talk about a mob programming team, and this is all about really working well together as a team, we're going to have all kinds of different skills, all kinds of different capabilities working together at the same time on the same thing. It's not like a homogeneous or whatever group of people. It's all developers or all testers or all database experts. We're going to have all the skills we need to do the work we're trying to do. That's part of what this is about, the way that we work. This is what it looks like from the front. You can see there's 6 or 7 people there. It's whatever you need to get the work done that you're currently working on. You need all the skills so you're not wasting time going and asking other people that aren't sitting with you questions. You're not spending time trying to track down answers to things. And this is what it looks like from the back. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a video in a moment, but I really want to show you this as well. It can be done remotely. I added this slide in about a year ago because everybody would ask, well, what if you're not sitting right next to each other? This actually works pretty good. The last 2 years, I've worked quite a bit this way. This is a company in Richmond, Virginia. I don't work with them, but I visited them. But they have their team members remote, and they can work using a web conferencing type setup. There's lots of ways to do it now, and we won't get into that today. One other thing I want to share before we get into the meat of this thing is this was all originated at Hunter Industries in San Marcos, California. Hunter Industries is a manufacturer of very high quality irrigation products that are used for landscape irrigation, also lighting products. When I worked there, they had hired me to manage a team of people, and I'll talk about that in a second, but their primary thing is manufacturing. And the reason I really like to show this slide is their byline there, built on innovation. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. This is what it looks like at Hunter Industries right now. You can see about 5 or 6 workstations. We'll see a video in a second that will show more of this. Another view of them, but now I'm going to show you a bunch of views of other people. These are some folks in Alaska, France, I think, the UK perhaps. I haven't been able to track down where that came from. Hungary, GDS in London. You've probably heard of London. Boston, Unruly in London. You guys, I was just talking to some folks here that know of Unruly. That is Alex right there. Some folks in Sweden, some folks in South Africa. They made a video. You can find this on YouTube. Let's see what else we have here. Some other folks in Sweden. I'm showing you that there's all kinds of different setups, but there's a couple other purposes as to why I'm showing you this. Here's another group in London, I believe. Here's some folks in South Africa. I've noticed that the people below the equator face the other direction than the people, and I'm not sure what's going on, but it has something to do with the different hemispheres, I guess. Here's some folks in Prague. Look at that setup. Dang. Some folks in Florida, a bit more relaxed kind of a work area. Some folks in Greece. I want to show this one specifically. This is Meltwater in Gothenburg, Sweden. And you'll notice these people are sitting, they just put some desks together, some tables together. They're sitting comfortably. And across the way, they pulled in a table so they could put a larger monitor sitting on it. This is a sufficient setup as long as you can see the monitor and everybody can kind of read it without squinting, because squinting is something we had to learn to deal with early on in our escapades, because it was giving some people headaches. So we figured out how do we make it where it's just as comfortable to work as a team as it is to work as an individual. When you're sitting at your own workstation, you can set things up to suit yourself, but when it's a team, you have to figure that out. And I like to show this next picture, say they need some bigger monitors. And I give these guys a lot of kudos, is that the right word? Respect, because they're trying to work and get some stuff done and work together, but it's not a comfortable work area. I do like to say you're not really on a team if you can't smell your teammates, but this may be a little too close. Here's some people who did get some large monitors. You know these guys aren't programming as such, but this is a really cool example of what it means for a team to work together on a single thing at the same time. And those bigger screens is information everybody has to stay aware of, but they'll have other things that they're doing all together at the same time. Now I want to show you a couple things. Day in the life of a mob programming team. I want to show you a video of this. And I'm only going to show a couple minutes. There's no sound of this. You can find it on YouTube. But let's see what we can do. So we put this together in 2012 because people started asking us, well, what does this look like? And I started getting invited to go speak at conferences. So I thought, well, why don't we just put this together? One of the team members he had a little iPad or something that could take a time-lapse video. You'll notice that we spend the first hour studying together. We never have to do a stand-up. We actually do almost no meetings as such. We're working together. This is showing us we had dual projectors at that time. Now we use monitors, a single computer through which all the work goes. You'll see there's other computers around here. But this is the important thing. We've got somebody we call the driver. The driver is a role that changes at that time every 15 minutes, and everyone else is a navigator. The navigators are guiding us on where we're going, and the driver's just typing it in, so to speak. The product owners come and spend time with us. We always have, at that time, I worked as a manager with them. I was a coding manager for a while, but I was trying to hand off all that work to the rest of the team. So this is about where I'll stop this one, because I want to show you today, same place. Now you can find that on YouTube, so you can show your family and spend a lot of time with your friends looking at videos about mob programming. I think you would enjoy that, and I'm just kidding. So here we go, same place. Slightly different work area. We took a larger, and I no longer work there, I want to make that clear, but I do go back and visit them every month or so. You'll see basically everything's kind of operating the same, but we now have a bunch more teams. There's an hour skills learning session that happens every morning. Sometimes people will be doing retrospectives during that time. Once they kicked into work, you'll see the teams are basically gathered around their own work areas. We've put in, it's pretty much the same video, just with a lot more stuff going on. It's the same things that we're saying here. You're going to see in a second that this has got a tremendous graphic that shows you all the teams. It's so cheery and enlightening to see the sparkliness. And you'll see that these 6 teams, now there's 8 teams there. So there's 6 teams. We have a continuous integration, continuous deployment or delivery area. Each team's responsible for getting their product deployed, and we have complete control of that. The product owners stay, or a lot of times stay in our area. They have their own office to work, and they come out and spend time with the teams. I'm going to go ahead and shut this down after one more bit, because you can see this on the internet. Why spend the time here with it? We put in there that it's happy programmers only because everybody who's ever come to visit us has said something to the effect of, everybody seems to really be enjoying their day. So there's other things we can see in here. We only have an hour for a talk here. Oh, one thing I will point out, you notice we pretty much all take lunch at the same time. We got to the point where we wanted to optimize the amount of time we were spending together as a team. So if everybody comes in at about the same time in the morning, spends about the same time during lunch, and it leaves about the same time every day, we're optimizing the amount of time we get to spend together and working together. I won't point out any specific people, but just in this picture alone, there are 2 authors who are well known for their specialties, who have written books over the years. At least 2 that I can see, maybe 3. So that's kind of fun. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and shut that down. I brought in Twitter. I'm not going to even, we don't need to see this, but if we go to in Twitter and put in mob programming, I surprise myself every day, because I do this at least once a day, and I'll see all kinds of people commenting on it, people who are trying it, people who are speaking about it. That's amazing to me. Let's get back to the presentation. That's just bragging. So, okay. So to be able to do this requires a number of things. The primary thing is we need to learn a way to work well together. So I'm going to just share a little bit now, and in a moment I'll tell you how we came upon this. But the basic thing is we use this idea of the driver navigator. The driver navigator came from a friend of mine. I learned it from a friend of mine. I'm not getting this to click very well. There we go. Llewellyn Falco, who's a brilliant programmer, but also a very forward-thinking, extreme programming and agile mind. He just really is focused on how can we make things better all the time. So this is the thing. We've got the driver, and everyone else is considered the navigator. The driver's main job is to trust the navigators that he's being guided in the right direction, and just translate the ideas that we're trying to get into code. The navigators have to navigate the person who's at the keyboard at the level they're able to accept. So we can actually have a complete code newbie who has never written code before and join the team, and they can actually write code because there's people there who can guide them. While the code's being written, the rest of the team is sort of peripherally at least paying attention to what's being written. It's usually a line or 2 at a time, and we were always using a test-driven approach. And they're talking about, well, what do we do next? So we would give a little bit of an idea, what's got to get just translating the code, give our ideas about it, and then the team's moving on as a group that's all thinking about what's coming down the pipe. So as questions come up, there's always somebody there to answer them. We'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. This might seem like it's not very productive, and we'll cover that in a moment. Why would we have 5 people all at one computer? It's not about optimizing the individuals, but again, we'll talk about that in a bit. So here's the thing. You know what? I reached over there to click, and the computer's over here, so it really doesn't work. For an idea to go from somebody's head into the computer, it has to go through someone else's hands. So I'll ask you, the audience here, what would that entail? What does that mean we have to be good at? Communication. And communication is not a one-way thing to be done right. We have to be able to express our ideas, our intent. We have to be able to scrutinize it a little bit. We need to be able to say things that we can get into code quickly and easily. So we're going to break it down into very small bits as we go. And the person that's hearing these things, that's translating into code, they have to be ready to ask questions if they don't understand what's going on. So this is all part of a protocol of how can we work together to actually write code. I'll do this real quickly here because I kind of think we've stumbled upon something that's a little different way of thinking about computers. So first of all, we have a dumb input device, the keyboard. It can't do anything unless a human activates it by clicking on it. Why do we use a keyboard, by the way? Does anybody know? Because we always have. Good, at least we got an answer. Because everybody else is sitting there going, well, I don't know how to answer that. No better option. So, what would be a better option? Now, if I sat down to try and invent a better way to program than using a keyboard. So here's the thing. I don't talk to you like this. DRIVER/, but that's how we talk to our computer. You really want me to talk more in the form of ideas than even in sentences or words. So that's part of why a picture's worth 1,000 words, as they say. So let's see what we can do, what changes here. When we have a driver, we now have, and in California, this is pretty much what the person at the keyboard might look like. When we have a driver, we now have a smart input device. So we have the dumb input device, and we have the smart input device. I can talk to the person that's at the keyboard, and they can translate what I'm thinking and saying into code. If you work with a product person who doesn't code at all and doesn't want to code, they can start expressing ideas. I think that we need a drop down there. And they go, you know what, that drop down really needs to have some checkboxes in it, or whatever. And we can communicate, and that person turns it into code. We've risen the level up of who is a programmer. A programmer is anyone who has a useful idea for this product. Not everybody has to take the keyboard. It's not a requirement that anybody takes the keyboard. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Everybody's a navigator, though. In other words, there's not a lot of value in having somebody there on the team if they're not contributing to the effort that we're doing. And that's an important thing to think about. There is a kind of contribution that is just merely learning. So if you feel that you're learning something, that's a kind of contribution as well. It's, I think, an equal first-class level contribution to be learning, just as it is to be directing. So the team is discussing things, but we have to have a way, this is our mechanism. We use a rotation. So the person at the keyboard isn't stuck there all day long. And this was the way we worked. You might find a different way to work if you decide to try this for yourself. We used a timer. That represents our timer. This is a timer that's actually software we wrote for ourselves. You can put the list of the people who are working that day, start the timer, and it comes up and it just says, okay, if Jason's the first one, Jason, please sit at the keyboard and start working. And the rest of the team will say, yeah, the first thing we need to do is this, or whatever it is, and they open it up. It could be as simple as this. I could say, well, working on this customer dunning project where if a customer's late on their payments all the time, we have to send them an email saying, you're going to lose your credit rating if you're not paying on time. So I would say, well, we need be able to get a customer object, and we're going to look at their last year's worth of invoices looking for late payments. And the person at the keyboard might be able to just start coding that. They know that there's a customer object that exists. They know that there's going to need to be a query to get that person's invoices. Maybe we're going to need an invoice object and some way to display this stuff. But if the person at the keyboard isn't that far along in their abilities to program, especially in this particular language and or on this project, we might go down to a lower level, all the way down to saying, go to line 32, type in, new customer, equal new customer, then lowercase customer equals whatever, or you're going to capture that, so you're going to get a var customer equals new customer. We just navigate at the level that person can accept. Pretty soon, whoever's at the keyboard starts becoming a better programmer as we rotate through the day. I've actually seen people start who had never programmed before in their life, and after a couple weeks, they're kind of programming, at least within the environment that we have here. So it kind of looks like this. Somebody sits down, Jason, let's say that is, and they start working. I want to show you this. I'm not clicking. It's a completely animated thing. It took me 4 hours to do that, so I have to point that out because that was way too much work to have people ignore. So there we go. We just rotate through, and then when we're done, we start over again. So you notice that we're keeping this same order throughout the day, and that just makes it easier for us to work. But you don't have to do it this way. I've seen about 5 other ways teams work. As long as we use the basic concept that for an idea to go from someone's head, it has to go through someone else's hands, we're okay. That means if I'm at the keyboard and I have an idea, I go, oh wait, I think I know what to do. We either stop the coding for a while and talk, or I give up my place at the keyboard if I think I can navigate it and let someone else take the keyboard. Because we want to hear it out loud and we want to see it on the whiteboard. Let's just start diagramming stuff. We have a key thing about working on a team is visualizing things, and that's hard to do if we don't use visual elements to do that. Another important thing about a team is to have words you can describe things with. So it's as soon as we get an idea that we think we can make a name for or a word for, we're trying to look for a way to describe that thing in a word so we can condense down our stuff. So this pretty much is the way it works. I'm going to share with you real quickly how we discovered this. When I first started giving these talks, people would ask questions, and so I would start writing the questions down for the next talk. I'd try to answer them, and then during my next talk, I'd try to include it in the talk. So this chunk, this next 5 or 6 slides, covers a bunch of questions people used to ask, like, how did you set out to invent this? And we didn't. So that's what we're going to share here. We discovered this accidentally. I'd been hired. This is a representation of me when I was young and handsome and very capable. And when I got hired, I had some ideas about how to go forward. They brought me in to help a team that wanted to learn to do a lot better than what they were doing, and they really felt that doing stuff in an agile manner would be worthwhile. Personally, I consider agile a good way to go. It's not probably the only way to go, so I was sort of maybe a good candidate for this. So once I went to work for them, they showed me, well, actually before, they had some big nasty problems and some big nasty projects. I reviewed the code in all these projects, and I knew there was a lot that people needed to learn. But I didn't want to be the kind of a boss who comes in and says, I've reviewed your code, and I'm really ashamed for you guys. I didn't want to be the kind of boss that says, you're going to need to really come up in your skill levels. What I wanted to do is to provide an environment where they can learn the things that I was hoping they would learn. They could decide for themselves how to go forward, and someday they would come to me and say, hey, we've been looking at some of our code, and it's got problems in it. So then I'm not the bad guy. I just wanted to make it easy for them to get better at what they were doing. So first thing I did is I put the big nasty projects on the back burner, because it was more important for me to learn some things that we're going to see next than to get the work done. So we kept taking on work while I was there during this first chunk of time, but we were taking on stuff that was of the sort that would allow us to learn quickly, instead of stuff we were already being dragged down in. If you've got a situation where everybody's going home at the end of every day going, we didn't get anything meaningful done, that's probably not a place to be. So I wanted to where we were getting good stuff done every day. One thing that's important to me is this. Let's figure out how to work well together. That doesn't mean anything more than we need to get along well and help each other as much as possible. I've worked in a lot of organizations where that doesn't really happen. And I've noticed when we get that, we get a lot more value out of our time spent on stuff. This is also really important to me, is the people doing the work can figure things out. They're often not given the opportunity to figure out how to do the work. This is about doing the work itself. This is about how are we going to arrange ourselves to do the work. One thing that's really critical to me is that we learn to practice and study together. And the reason I think that practicing and studying together is important, I really love this picture. So probably you've all noticed that somebody related to me makes these pictures. That my wife is a children's book illustrator. And this was actually for a story she was coming up with. And so whenever I see a picture that kind of fits what I think my slides should use, I ask her if I could use it. And if she does let me use it, then I put them right in my slide pack. I love this one. The thing is, when we practice together, we're in an environment where we're helping each other. When we're working, we're just under the pressure of getting work done. When we're playing or going out to lunch or something together, we're in a different mode, which is more just a social mode. But when we're practicing together, we're actually trying to help each other. And I think that that's a skill that's good to have, to be helpful to each other. And we bring that back into our work once we start learning how to do that by studying together. So we set aside 3 hours per week, every Friday for 3 hours, and we would study together. And we did it very deliberately using a Coding Dojo style. In the Coding Dojo style, we would have one person at the keyboard, one person navigating, and everyone else was an observer, but we would rotate, so everybody every 4 minutes would have a turn navigating or driving. And so as we would rotate through, the observers have to be ready to navigate in a moment. As soon as they come up, they're going to express their intent, and off we go. Whoever's at the keyboard just accepts whatever's there and works from there. There's like a couple simple rules. One of them is, if you don't like what's already been done, but there's some tests in place that proves it works, you can't just delete it. You can refactor to better. So this is just a Coding Dojo style that I'd been using at code camps and conferences just for fun, getting people together just to have some fun. And we just used it as a study mechanism. It works pretty good for that. You might try it if you haven't already. But here's the thing. We were getting good at this. And this means the communicating, the listening to each other. There was another rule. Only the navigator can speak. The observers are not allowed to speak until it's their turn. The driver can't speak except for to ask a clarifying question. They can't ask a question like, wouldn't it be better if you, that's not a good question. The kind of question you could say is, wait, did you say a customer object? Let's get clarity. Two other things. This is important to me. Let's get good results from our retrospectives. And if we're not good at that, we have to figure out how to get good at that. And the way we worked at getting better was we were trying 2-week retrospectives. We decided to try to do them once a week. Then we decided to try to do them every day. So at the end of every day, we'd have a 10-minute retrospective. It's kind of like with me. I am in a pretty good shape right now, but I can weigh a lot more than I weigh right now. And I've had it where I've weighed considerably more. And I noticed that if I weigh myself every morning, it's easier for me to keep on track than if I weigh myself weekly or once a month. So I've gotten the habit of weighing myself every morning, and now I can go, I didn't do so good today, and try to do a little bit better tomorrow. It's easier for me. That's how it is with a lot of things like this. I've noticed with retrospectives, it's often a time where we get together, find some things we want to make better, to put them on a kind of a list of things we want to make better, and then over the next 2 weeks, we don't do anything about them. So we're like it's a collection of things we would like to do better, but we never get around to doing better. With this 10-minute retrospective, we just chewed off or bit off enough to chew for that next day. It worked pretty well for us. So the last thing is turn up the good. So this is something I learned a long time ago from reading Kent Beck's book, Extreme Programming Explained, where in the first edition, somewhere in there, he says, I pictured all the practices I was using that I thought were good, and I was picturing them as if they were the knobs on a control board, like a soundboard. I was wondering what it would be like if I just turned them all up. How high could I turn them up? I like that. So I just adopted that for myself. We often are looking at what are the problems on our team, how do we fix the problems? And to me, what he was saying was, let's look for what's already going good and make that better. Maybe that's a better approach. And I found it to work really well for us. So one day, we needed to resurrect one of these really nasty projects. It had a 9-month deadline, now it had a 3-month deadline. We didn't put it off so we would feel more under pressure, because you work better under pressure. Nobody actually does, I don't think. But I knew there were a lot of problems in the code. And I felt the team had gotten to the point where they were ready to notice the problems themselves, and I didn't have to point them out. The 2 people who were going to take on this work had worked on it previously with some contractors. And as they took on the work, they started looking at it and saying, there's a lot of problems in here. Let's get the team together. We want to have the help of everybody to look at this and decide maybe we need more people to work on it. Who's going to work on this with us? So we got in one of these standard meetings where we're going to look at something, people are going to share some information, we're going to talk about it, analyze that information, we're going to spend some time making some decisions about who will work on what. Then we would assign that to people to work on, and they off would go and work. That's like a typical meeting. But as soon as we got in the meeting, somebody on the team said, I see we have a big, long method there. Let's go ahead and clean that up. Because there was a little thing we'd learned along the way. When you have code that's hard to understand, just refactor it for a little while, and it'll start clarifying itself to you. So we started refactoring it. That was done automatically. Someone on the team just noticed it. The person at the keyboard noticed it. So they put the keyboard off to someone else, and they stood up, and they were using a Coding Dojo style now. Basically, someone else takes the keyboard, so I'm going to say my idea out loud, and it's going to go through everybody's ears, and it's going to get distilled into the fixes. So how do you fix a long method? Who knows? What do you do to fix a long method? Extract out the paragraphs in it, the if clauses and whatnot. So you extract them out, give them good names, and pretty soon you're composing a method. That's not that hard to do, but I noticed two things. The team had learned to recognize that. It's one of the things we were learning. And the team knew how to deal with it. So off we went. After 10 minutes, we went to the next thing and the next thing. After an hour and a half, somebody came into the room, and they said something to the effect of, you folks have to leave. We've reserved this space. So it was the end of the meeting. So this was, I think, a foundational thing for us that very moment. Someone on the team said, let's go find an empty room somewhere. We could have just said, we're done. The meeting's over. Let's go back to our cubicles. And maybe we'll meet again in a few days to look at this some more. We wanted the good to continue. That's really, in real time, turn up the good. No retrospective needed. Someone says their intent. Let's go find a room right now. We went on our scheduler, found a room that was empty, went to it. As soon as we got there, another team member said, well, why don't we just book rooms for the rest of the day? That's telling us a lot. The first observation was, why don't we just keep working this way today or for the next few hours? The second was, well, I think this was pretty good too. Why don't we just do this the rest of the day? We did that. Nobody said, no, we can't do that. At the end of the day, we did our regular short retrospective. And everybody said, why don't we just book rooms for all of tomorrow? That was 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago now, 5.5 years. And that we've been working that way, as you saw, every day since. We just stopped going from room to room. We found a permanent little closet kind of a space, not much bigger than maybe twice the size of this stage. Moved everything to one side, put a table in there, projected up on the wall. We were working on things together. As soon as it started for us, it started becoming clear that this was something we didn't want to stop doing. So that's why I'm sharing this with you. I don't think I could tell you that this will work for you. It's just something that worked for us. And we were in a space that allowed us mentally to say, let's turn up the good. So this little combination of ideas, I'm pointing the wrong way, this little combination of ideas grew into this concept that I've been using for about 35 years. To paraphrase this for software, I would say the object isn't to create great software, it's to make things in such a way that great software just happens. That means you put together an environment where good things will happen, where people can excel at their work. And if you do that, good things will happen. So, I like to ask this question. I'll do this as an exercise. Why would we work this way? Share with me, just imagine, why might this be good? Share with me a few ideas. Anybody? Yes?
It's definitely a faster way to onboard new team members.
It's a very fast way to onboard new team members. I don't have enough time to share all about that.
You don't have that dip period of time where somebody's pulled away from the project to go train somebody else.
Right, so that's like a double loss. Somebody comes onto this team, they're instantly becoming familiar with the code we have, and they can use their coding skills if that's what they bring, or their testing skills right away. What else? The bus factor. So basically, we're getting a little bit of redundancy, that if we were to lose somebody from the team, we can keep going. What else? You had something back there. Oh, so this is so each thing we work on gets started and done at the same time. We're not trying to coordinate overlapping work. Is that sort of what you mean? I like that. What else? That's about flow. Yes? Yeah, we're becoming a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is. We're starting to get familiar with the tools that everybody's using, and we're kind of narrowing down on the ones we think will work best. Yes? No merging of code. So that was that's something we noticed right away. You know, the rule with merges is merge often. You know, because you want to get it merged in before somebody else has made changes. With this, we've never had merging problems. What else? Anything else? Yes.
So you get everyone's strength at once. I might know how to use the HTTP library really well. You might know the business domain really well. And each of us on our own would make different mistakes.
Oh yes. So we are we are now bringing everyone's strengths together at the same time on this thing. When I work alone, the very best of me and the very worst of me gets into everything I write. When I work with a pair, the best of both of us, and almost never the worst of either of us gets into it. And when you work with a group like this, it's the best of a whole team. The whole team of people who've got to work on this anyways. Anything else? What else might be a good reason that we do this? Yes? Because we're reviewing as we go. The BA is there to say, oh, wait, my idea, that isn't actually going to work so well. I'd rather do this. And we're doing that feedback in real time. That's a powerful thing. So I'm going to share one more that I often hear. I hope some of you have seen this as a lot of fun. It's a fun way to work. So it's a very enjoyable way to work. So here's the thing. Why would we work this way, all gathered together? It's a trick question. All the things that we've mentioned here are what we noticed and why we kept doing this. But the reason we would work this way is because we were able to decide to work this way. I've worked at a lot of places we weren't even allowed to pair program. If they saw you pair programming for more than a little bit of time, they'd want to know, why are you wasting time? I've even worked at places where you weren't allowed to do test-driven development. I can't hardly work without test-driven development because I don't trust my work. So it's a trick question because all those are values that we've seen as well. And that's why we were paying attention for good and we turned up the good. So let's look at a couple more things. I think we're doing okay for time, right? Does anybody know when we're supposed to be done? So we can go forever? I don't know. We're probably right on schedule. And if I get near the end and I'm not finished, we can just stop anywhere. Because you're learning the basics here, and there's a few gotchas that I share near the end. So this is a question I got from almost the very first talk I gave. How can you work this way? And it's usually asked like this. How can you work this way? Programmers will argue endlessly about just about everything. And I've heard that over and over. And first of all, I have seen that. I've seen those arguments where somebody goes, no, that's 6. Oh, no, it's half a dozen. No, it's 6. No, it's half a dozen. And they'll go like that for a half hour. I've seen people argue whether this is a story point 2 or a story point 3 for an hour. And we would have been done with the work by then. So, and don't get me started on story points. Anyways. So how can we work this way? So we, as a team, started getting on each other's nerves after a while. And as soon as we noticed, because we were paying a lot of attention, we said, let's get together and see what we can do about this. The Agile Manifesto kind of hints at that in its first value, and that is that individuals and interactions are what this is all about. We have individuals on our teams, and they have to interact. If they can't interact, then we really have a management problem. Because how are we going to get these people to get their work done if they're not really interacting well with each other? So we knew we could see for ourselves that we would get on each other's nerves, which meant some of us were insensitive to what other people were experiencing because of the things we were doing to them and stuff like that. And in reverse, maybe some people were feeling people weren't contributing enough, all kinds of things. So we got together in a little retrospective sort of. We spent about an hour on this, and we asked this question of ourselves. How would you like to be treated by your team members? And then we asked everybody to just take their Post-it notes, as many words as they could, one per Post-it note, write down, how do I want to be treated? And we came up with these 3. We did an affinity grouping, grouped them by theme, and we came up with these 3 words. Everybody was saying, we want to be treated, I want to be treated with kindness, consideration, and respect. Now, there's other words we could have used. We picked these particularly, and then we looked them up, verified that they were meaningful the way we thought they were. But here's the thing. We clearly didn't know how to do this. How do you learn to do this? So we made a little pact amongst the team for a day. We're going to pretend to treat each other with kindness, consideration, and respect. And let's see what that feels like. Can we even pretend for a day? You can just about pretend anything for a day, right? We did it for a day, and we decided to continue it the next day. And after a few weeks, a lot of us started looking up articles we could read about how do you learn to do this? But we were already getting better at it. And I want to make this really clear. I'm not a very kind or considerate or respectful person. And I can look back over my career at times where I was completely not kind or considerate or respectful. For example, consideration is about considering somebody else's point of view or considering someone else's feelings. To be able to consider their point of view, what do you have to do? What's that? So you have to be able to empathize, but before we can do that, what do we need to do? We need to understand it. To be able to understand their point of view, what do we need to do? We have to listen. To be able to listen, what do we have to do? Shut up. That's exactly right. So we got to it. That's the 5 whys. You ever seen a 5 whys? It only took us 4. This is the thing. We have to learn to be quiet. That's hard for some of us. Now, I'm sort of they call it an ambivert, I guess. Somewhere in between being an extrovert and an introvert. I have some qualities from both sides of that. But I notice that in some groups, I don't say anything. And in other groups, I'll be more talkative. Maybe I feel I need to fill in the gap or something. I really had to learn when I felt like talking to not talk. That's not an easy thing to learn. And when I do my workshops on this, that's one of the things we spend some time on. How do we learn to not say something when we feel we really want to say something? That we think that our words will solve everything. And it doesn't necessarily ever work. This is what we needed to do. And I will say, I believe today I'm a much better person than I was 5 years ago. After working with a team for 3.5 years, once we started working this way, I've just focused on all of these things, and I think I'm a much better person. Probably very few people in the world would agree with you, but with me on that, but that's the way I feel. So let's go on just another step. This is a question that people would often bring to me when they've been trying mob programming, but didn't get much direction from anyone else on it. They just saw our videos and started doing it. They would say this, that we're getting tired. It takes us an hour or two of doing this, and then we're starting to get worn out. And our team had been already working for a year or so this way, and we didn't. We found it very relaxed. We found it very sustainable. So we started thinking about that, and a cool thing happened. We hired a new guy on the team, and he came in and started working, and we noticed he'd come in the morning, and he had like 4 or 5 of those energy drinks, and sometimes he'd open like 2 of them and down them all at once. It's like, okay, that's not a good sign. And every now and then he'd start dozing off. He would just start kind of snoring in place. And so one of us asked, what's going on? We thought maybe he's having, trouble at home or something. And he said, well, there's so much here I'm trying to absorb. It's too much. I can't do all this. I'm trying to learn everything we're doing. And I feel like I get home and I have to study, and I still got to go take the kids to their band practice or whatever. And I said, I just can't keep up. And everyone on the team said at the same time, oh, that's a good point, because we don't try to do that. We're here to contribute our expertise. We don't need to know everything that's going on here. We're not trying to learn everything. It slowly seeps in. Let's find a way to be relaxed. So you have to pay attention to yourself. Am I wearing myself out? So we have to pay attention to that. And we came up with this saying that we got from a book called Essentialism. I've kind of slightly paraphrased it. But what you want to do is pay just enough attention so you can contribute your best to the team at just the right time and in just the right way, rather than trying to contribute all the time. Even when it's the stuff, there might be someone else on the team who can contribute better. As a matter of fact, a big step forward is to realize that even the not-so-good ideas from other team members are often worth trying. And you just complicate things by trying to argue as to why we shouldn't even try it. Why don't we try it? Maybe it will work good enough. Maybe I'll learn something. And if it still didn't get us where we needed to be, I can contribute my idea. So there's a lot going on here. Let's give up the idea that my ideas have to be proven, that we can just go ahead and let this thing ride. And then we'll see. It worked well for us. So that's the question. This leads into this. Everybody asks. The first 2 questions I almost always hear is, how can this possibly be productive? The other is, what's the right number of team members? The second question I'll cover, but I don't think it's nearly as important as this one. So this is usually asked something like this: how can 5 people be productive at one computer? And my first reaction was, I don't know, we just noticed it is. So it's something like this. We'd put a slide together like this for some product people at our company to show them the results we were seeing. When we worked as individuals, we would get a certain amount done when we combined that work at the end of the week. And when we worked as a team, we got a whole lot more done. Now, this isn't proof of any kind, because those yellow cards aren't necessarily representing the same size things. But I want to point this out. The tester in our group there, Aaron sitting at the far end, or whatever you call the far end on that side, he noticed out of this group, we just taken these cards out of we have a bin where we throw the cards when we're done with them, put them up, put them on the table, took a picture. And he looked at it and said, hey, did you notice everything there is from 2 days? That's kind of a tester's mind. He's looking for that kind of stuff. 2 days, except for one card. 17th and 18th of April, 2013. One of them was like from the 13th. So that kind of clicked off something in our mind. Let's go back and see typical 2 days of work right now. We looked at several examples. And what was it a year ago? Typical 2 days. And that was the difference that we saw. That's how we came up with this. This isn't proof of any kind. But this was showing us something. So, well, at first I would say, I don't know how we can be more productive. We just are. Then I started realizing there's a flip question. And I would just flip the question over. What makes you think your teams are productive when you're separating the people who should be working together? Now, I thought that was a better question, and I still think it's a better question. But then I like to use this advice. Well, I don't know if this is advice. This bit of info. It's in the pursuing of questions, and he uses the term profound questions, that we get value, not in the getting of practical answers. So this is about, if you ask the right question, it will lead to a better question. And that will lead to a better question. And eventually you'll get a question that you really need to answer. And usually the answer appears when you get that, because you now have gotten to an enlightened thinking about this one thing, whatever it is. So I sat down, took a couple days and said, what is a more meaningful question than how can we be productive with 5 people sitting at one computer? And I came up with this as the question. What are the things that destroy productivity? Oh, let's do that as an exercise right now. Can we do this? Let's spend 2 minutes. Does anybody know when we're supposed to be done? 6:40. Okay, let's spend 2 minutes and group into groups of 2 or 3 people, find somebody nearby, and come up with 2 or 3 ways that, or things that happen to us that make it hard for us to get our work done. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll set my timer, and please go ahead and start right now. Does everybody have a couple things? At least 2? Because we could go on with this for an hour probably. I think we probably have enough. I'm going to ask for a volunteer who has halfway decent handwriting to come up and we'll capture these things. Would somebody come forward to do that? Please, thank you. Because I could do it myself, but then you won't be able to read it any better than what I wrote there. So I'm going to just, any group, we'll just start here. What's one of the things you came up with? Things that destroy productivity, things that make it hard to get our work done.
Yeah, the first one was disagreement.
Which is what? Disagreement. So let's capture one from someone else. Well, pick what you think is the top one. Lack of focus. What about this team here?
Yeah, it's sort of get clarification,
The delay in getting clarification for things. I worked on something for a week with a team. It was a place where I was doing a lot of coding. And we finally got at the end of the week, we said, we don't really understand this thing. We thought we did. We got the person who wrote the requirement to come. It took us a couple weeks to get them. And once we got the permission to have them come share time, we said, read Read this and explain it to us. That's our 2 minutes are up. And what do you think that person said? I don't know. I don't know what I meant. Wow. Let's go on. What's that? Doing work that doesn't need to be done. I love that. What about, were you on a team? Which team were you with? Solo. Let's go ahead and back there. Yes. I can't quite hear you. Could you? Technical debt. Let's go on. That's a great one. What else? Another team. Distractions. Oh, yes. That's like the drive-by distraction. Because did you see the game last night? You know, it's like, I'm in the middle of doing work, and now it's going to take me an hour to get back to where I was. Any kind of distraction. We can do it to ourselves. What else? Any other team? So what did you have? Interruptions. Getting stuck on errors. And, you know, one of the things, I haven't heard it yet here, does anybody got bugs? Redoing work. So one thing I've noticed is that all the work we're actually trying to do stops when we have to fix a bug. So this is probably enough just to get started. We have, besides these, does anybody have something else? When it's no fun. Can you imagine what, you guys, none of you remember World War I, but you've seen movies. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be in trenches in World War I, day after day, day after day? Nothing good happening. The best thing that ever happens is you find an extra bug to eat, and not the same kind of bug. This is sad. What else? Anything that wasn't up here? So I didn't quite catch that. Lack of communication between members. My favorite one is you send somebody an email, they don't get back to you the next day and say, well, I was in meetings all day, I'll take a look at this tomorrow. You know, that's a lack of communication. Anything else that we don't already have up there? Some people like to just work on their own, and it's hard to... So how does that destroy productivity? What's that? Oh, they can go rogue. Matter of fact, one thing I like to think about is silos. If you have a silo of knowledge, you often will find along with it a silo of errors or a silo of dysfunction. What else? Anything that we didn't cover? So let's go forward. We did the exercise. Somebody brought that up. I'm glad we did. This is the thing. We came up with a list of about 40 initially, and every time I've done this talk, I've gotten more. And what we've gotten right here, right now, pretty much fits into one of these buckets somewhere or another. Technical debt. Thrashing is the distractions. If somebody, I've often seen it where someone high level in the company will come in and say, we're looking at some stuff we're thinking of doing next year. We're going to take a member from your team to come look at it with us. Who do they usually take? The senior, most capable person everyone else turns to for getting answers. And off they go for 2 weeks for some meetings about work we are never going to do. And there they are. We've destroyed the productivity of the team. Meetings, often, I don't know if anybody said meetings. It's a kind, you had it. So meetings is a weird thing because they really do seem like they should be good, but it's rare that you meet somebody that says, oh yeah, our meetings are really effective. So let's go on. This is the thing. We did not set out to solve these problems. What happened for us was these problems faded away. Many of these problems faded away, at least to some degree. So it looks like this. They faded away when we started working as a team. I'm going to share one kind of a problem, and I think we'll be done with the amount of time that we have, because we're in the red zone now. They have this little thing here that shows me you better be done. I'm going to talk about question queue time. I'm going to do this rather quickly, and then we'll skip some slides. The question queue time is the amount of time that we must wait to get an answer to a question that is blocking us. If we do a value stream map, it would look like this. Where green is we're working on our code, the little blue line going up and down, we got a question we need to get an answer for, and the red is the amount of time we waste. If this was a full day of work, we've wasted half our day waiting for answers. So we're going to do a very contrived example. What if for every hour we work, we get a blocking question? That means this bit of work we can't work on till we get the answer. So if you had no question queue time, that you could get the answer immediately, this is what your work would look like for the day. If it took you 2 minutes, or 10 minutes, or an hour, we're wasting half our day, or what if it took you all day? I've worked on projects where you couldn't get the answers from the person you needed to talk to, except for on the morning of Monday when we had our review of the last week, and what are we going to do next? We were blocked a whole week. So how do we typically solve for this? How do we typically solve for we're blocked on something? Anybody know? Switch. Work on something else. Task switching. Work on this while you're waiting for that answer. So looks like that. Of course, because I put these slides together, I put it together perfectly, so this happens. And there, our green is just green all the time, and it feels so wonderful to always have green. But guess what? There's also red all the time. We're always blocked. The context switching that's happening is a problem. And we never get them to match up like this. There's a lot of techniques people use to deal with this. But we are dealing with the symptom. The symptom is we're not busy enough. We want to stay busy. The problem actually is we're not getting our answers to the questions we have quickly. We solved for a symptom by introducing another problem. And that other problem is called inventory. We've introduced inventory into our process. And inventory is a bad thing. Here's basically what it is. Let's not solve a queuing problem by introducing an inventory problem. Inventory is stuff that we've worked on that is not yet delivering value. And if we're not delivering value on something that we've worked on, then that's just simply waste in our system according to lean concepts. So here's the thing. How did we solve for this? Remember, it's a trick question. We didn't solve for it. We just automatically noticed we weren't waiting to get answers to questions anymore because everybody was there. This is a fundamental thing to us. This makes real one-piece flow. We start on something and we get it done. Then we go to the next thing. Stories that used to take 2 weeks for individuals working separately to get done, we're now getting done in 3 or 4 hours, 2 or 3 hours. We were pushing to production 2 or 3 times a day on the projects we were working on. We noticed that we were often getting blocked by not having an answer from a product owner. This particular product owner noticed one day that something didn't get delivered that he wanted, and he came to ask us what had happened. We said, we'd been trying to contact you all day, but you didn't respond. So yeah, I was in meetings all day. And he realized, because I'd put some slides like this together, he said, well, if I could have answered you within 2 minutes, would have that helped? He said, yeah, we'd been done by now. And so he vowed to always answer questions within 2 minutes. So this is the kind of what automatic one-piece flow is. So I'm going to go ahead. I think I want to skip ahead through these slides. Because you can see these are the best ones, but you don't get to see them. I'm sorry. So I want to talk about the ideal number of team members, and then I think we're done. Here's the thing. I wanted to share about the question queue time first, because that's what told us about the right mix and number for the team. It's not like you're going to get 5 people, and you need a database person, and you need a tester, and you need a whatever. We need to have the right people so we don't get blocked by questions. So that was the first heuristic that we really saw was important. If we need these 5 people to get through this work without interruption, then let's get that together. The next thing was, if you feel you're contributing or you feel you're learning, that's a good team to stay on. If you don't feel you're contributing and you don't feel you're learning, maybe find something else to do. Go work alone. Nobody was ever compelled to work with the team. If they didn't feel it was beneficial, they go work alone. Some people always work alone. So that's our basic team heuristics. Do we recommend mob programming? And I already told you we don't. We're just sharing our experiences and inviting you to try it. We do recommend, or I recommend, that you get good at getting good results from retrospectives. I think that's a great place to start. Pay attention to what's working and turn it up. Just turn it up. Try that for a week. Pretend that's something that you do. My wife illustrated the book, Wolf Camp. She actually wrote it too. She's got 3 or 4 others that are coming out soon. I wrote a book on mob programming. It's available from LeanPub. Don't need to buy it, but there it is. And that's it. So I think we finished right on time with a minute left for questions. Good. So thank you very much. I had a great time.